County Commissioners, it's our 1:30 afternoon session. Thanks for joining us all around the table. We're going to start with our number 7 item, our Public Works, the work session of legal lot verification process improvements per a board assignment dated 3/18 of 25. We have Keir Miller, our Land Management Division Manager, with us, and Amber Bell, our Planning Director, and Mr. Dan Hurley, our Public Works Director, and Ms. Ann Davies, our official title?
Assistant County Counsel.
It's like the waiter, caught you right in mid-bite. Sorry about that. Assistant County Counsel. So who wants to lead this session off? Go ahead, please. Yeah, Keir, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Lavon. Good afternoon, Commissioners. I'm just going to kick it off, and then I'll turn it over to Amber to get into some of the material, and then she'll pass it back over to me. Thanks for this opportunity this afternoon. As you mentioned, we're here to kind of talk about legal lots. There has been a lot of discussion at the board level about the legal lot application process over the last few years. The board's heard about it a lot. There was a work session with the board back on March 28th where staff got really into the background on this topic and gave a lot of excellent detail. I'll admit it was very weedy though, it was really in the weeds. My goal today is to kind of stay out of the weeds a bit and talk higher level about legal lots, kind of some of the issues that you've heard about, and really to highlight some of the things we're doing around the legal lot application process and solicit feedback from the board. We know you've heard from some members of the public about things they'd like to see changed about the process. So really we're here to hear from you and get direction from the board on this topic. I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Amber, but first I'll just give a quick outline. So Amber will just do a really high-level recap of what the board heard on March 18th. We'll talk about the perceived issues in the legal lot review process, talk about why you hear so much about legal lots in Lane County. There's been an interest in how we fare at LUBA and also the hearings official when staff approve or deny an application and it's appealed. So I think what we have is a really excellent set of data, hopefully the definitive set of data to share with you on this topic. Then we'll get into the process improvements and some of the code updates that have been recommended and seek direction from the board. I'll turn it over to Amber.
Good afternoon. So we wanted to provide a quick recap of a few things that we covered at the March 18th work session, including what is a legal lot, what is not a legal lot, touching on the criteria, and then when a legal lot is required. So starting with what is a legal lot. So legal lot is a specific term that's defined in Lane Code Chapter 13. It essentially means that the county has verified the property through the procedures of Chapter 13, Section 13140. An approved determination or decision has been issued, or the property was created by subdivision or partition, and so it's exempt from the legal lot verification process, and the configuration of the property has not changed. In terms of the application criteria and process, those are also found in Lane Code Chapter 13, and they stem from ORS Chapter 92. So we pulled in the state law directly into the code for the specific criteria. That is, what is a lawfully established unit of land? And that includes, and that was adopted by the board in 2018, and the definition of lawfully established unit of land includes that property was created in accordance with a subdivision, partition, and zoning regulations. A deed or land sales contract was signed or occurred that followed zoning regulations, or a deed or land sales contract was put into place that predated those regulations. And in all cases, again, the property must remain in the same configuration. I will note that interpreting the deed or the land sales contract often involves going back and interpreting prior subdivision ordinances. So in that respect, that is adopted Lane County ordinance code policy that is interpreted. But by and large, the definition of lawfully established unit of land mirrors state law. And to expedite the process, a legal lot verification can be consolidated with another application. We have a consolidated review procedure if the applications are filed on the same day at the same time. As well, we have a reduced fee for consolidated property line adjustment and validation of unit of land, legal lot applications, and that is intended to streamline the process. So then, in terms of what is not a legal lot, so at a high level, a legal lot is not a process to create a new lawfully established property that requires a land division process. As of depending on the date, as of 1975, there was partition regulations in place. So based on today's zoning and land division regulations, that requires a land division. Generally, it's not intended as a curative process. It is a way to determine officially whether or not a property is a lawfully established unit of land, to answer that question. And so meaning that a legal lot is really a look at, it's an analysis of the historical land conveyances. We look at the evidence that is presented, and then staff makes an assessment and a decision is issued. And it's generally not a means to correct past conveyance issues. But there might be other options available. So state law has the validation of unit of land process in place if a property wasn't lawfully created. And Lane Code does include that process. And additionally, I'll mention that staff strive to identify and point out different potential options that might be available, like correcting a deed, putting things back into their lawful configuration when that's possible, with some sort of caveats that we can't make an official assessment and determine whether a property is approvable until we have an application before us. A legal lot's not a tax lot. A tax lot is created just for taxation purposes, so in and of itself, it doesn't signify whether the property was lawfully created. Another case where we know there is not a legal lot is when a decision has been denied. That said, there might be other options available still. If a property hasn't been verified yet, that is to say we just don't know yet whether the property has been lawfully created, so it must go through that process. And a deed or land sales contract does define ownership and title, but it needs to go through that process so that we can verify that it was filed, that it was recorded at the time that it complied with zoning and land division regulations. A preliminary approval for land divisions isn't yet a legal lot. It would need to go through the final platting process, and all conditions of approval would need to be complied with to finalize a partition, parcel, or subdivision lot. And then lastly, prior to 2010, we didn't have a codified process to require public notice of legal lot verification. Today in the code that's required, and those happen at the same time. We did have a procedure in place in 2004 that began to require public notice, a two-step process following a preliminary legal lot verification. That's just to say that if there's a preliminary legal lot verification that hasn't yet been noticed, then that would need to go through the public notice process. And then in terms of when a legal lot is required, so at a high level, a legal lot application is required when the code, which often stems from state law, indicates that property must be a legal lot, and the property hasn't already been created or verified through a land division or legal lot verification process, or the property's changed configuration. And as Mr. Miller will address in a bit in the presentation, Lane Code is somewhat unique compared with other counties in that it does require specifically a type 1 or type 2 application or final notice to verify if a property is lawfully established. Some other counties have restrictions or even specific criteria that specify when a property can be verified as a legal lot and guide the process, and others have some less formal procedures that we maybe don't receive the same appeals that we do here in Lane County. And then some examples of permits where a legal lot is required are land divisions, property line adjustments in any zones, special use permits for new uses sometimes require legal lot verifications, including new commercial uses, new industrial uses, some dwellings, and new dwellings on undeveloped or vacant land. And so now I'll hand it back to here.
Thanks. So yeah, I think that's a good thing to hit on again. I mean, a legal lot is really an important thing. It's like the building block for development. You need a legal lot before you can divide land, site a house. So it's an important step in the development process. It's very controversial when they're denied. And I wanted to sort of present the view that we hear from some applicants. So I know the board has heard some of this before, and so I just want to kind of reiterate the concerns that we hear often are that, you know, staff is purposely going out of their way to try to find ways to deny applications. And I don't want to come off as defensive, but I'll address each of these kind of in turn. And to that point, I just want to, as the data will show, we approve about 80% of all applications that we receive. It's extremely difficult for staff to deny an application. It's a lot of work. It's not something we want to do. When staff denies an application, they know that it's probably going to be appealed, as the data also shows that 10% of our approved applications are appealed, while 70% of our denied applications are appealed. So it's going to be considerable more work on staff. These issues are almost always elevated either to me or the Public Works Director, or Mr. Mokrahysky, to the board, elevated to state representatives. We've even been copied on emails going to the White House. So people take this thing all the way, you know, when they hear about a denial, which, you know, is understandable. Often there's a lot on the line for these applicants. But that's just to point out that, you know, staff understands that there is a lot on the line, and we take it seriously when we have to issue a denial. Staff have also been, you know, threatened with personal lawsuits for denying applications. So it's not something that we want to do. The reality is our staff are just hardworking and trying to follow the law and doing the best they can. They don't have any interest in whether or not a few lots in the county are determined as legal lots. It doesn't benefit them at all. So just want to provide that. Another issue that we hear is that we don't consult with county council. And while this may have been true in the past, we didn't always consult with county council. Now that we have Ms. Davies on staff, she's almost always consulted when a legal lot application is at hand. And I think every time a staff is proposing a denial. So we do run this through county council, these decisions.
A clarification on that? You said in the past we didn't, but once Ms. Davis came on board, we did, which has been, how long you been on board now?
A year.
So for the before a year, we did not consult county council.
Not all the time. We often did, just not as consistently. Yeah. Another concern we hear is that the hearings official who these are appealed to is underqualified or biased. We've heard concerns that 3 out of the last 4 hearings officials are either biased or have an agenda or are not qualified. I think the agenda or the jury's still out on the newest hearings official that the board has appointed. So far, that individual has heard 7 cases, and again, as the data shows, they've affirmed the county in 5 of those, and 2 others are pending. So we've had a good track record on affirm decisions without hearings official.
And for the record, who is that again?
His name is David Doofman.
Okay, thank you.
And then finally, there's this position that staff don't follow past precedent. And that's a challenging one because oftentimes an applicant will read a law or a decision or something and they'll think it means one thing, and then we'll talk with county counsel, we'll read the decision and we think it means another thing, and it may, so there's often a difference of opinion. It's like splitting hairs, and I don't want to really get into the details of that unless there are things the board wants us to discuss, and then we could do that. And then also we hear that staff, and the board just heard in testimony today, that staff are unwilling to advocate for applicants. And while we're supposed to be neutral decision makers in this process, we absolutely do try to identify paths, ways that the public can get to yes, and staff do routinely identify issues, roadblocks that we see with applications, and we suggest alternative options, such as the validation of a unit of land process when we don't think a lot can be determined as a legal lot. And that's even been happening more and more. As Amber will get into, we've hired an additional staff person to process legal lots, and they work with the public a lot on that sort of outreach at the front end. So that's something that we recognize there was room for improvement in, and we are trying to move more in that direction. From staff's perspective, I'll just say that, often it's challenging because we have to review the information that's in front of us, and oftentimes, these are complicated matters. It's not always an agent or an attorney providing us information, but it usually is. But oftentimes, these applications are incomplete. Staff will request some information, and it's either not provided or it's not provided in a timely manner, and it forces our hand to just say, we can't approve this with the information in front of us. So that's an ongoing challenge. Another thing is that lane code is very limited in how it treats legal lot applications. In other jurisdictions, there might be very specific guidance on when an illegal lot is approvable. And I'll just give you one example. In Deschutes County, there is a minimum lot size for legal lots. So you don't see applications for legal lots in that county on these little slivers of land or little pockets of land. So it eliminates a lot of the controversial applications right out of the gate because there is criteria in that code that sort of says this is and this isn't a legal lot, and we don't have very specific guidance. So that's a challenge for staff. We're relying on decisions of the courts often and past practice. I already mentioned that sometimes our recommendations on what sort of information can be provided or what route an applicant should take is ignored. There are times when we've told an agent or an applicant, it doesn't look like this is an approvable legal lot, but if you apply for a validation of a unit of land, we think that's an approvable route, and for whatever reason they choose not to do that. So that's another concern. We're required, we have statutory deadlines for. Yeah,
Sorry, Carrie, we have a question. Thank you.
Well, so what's the difference between, sounds like you're saying you have a roadway to possible success, but they're still choosing to go see the HO? Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah, they've applied for a legal lot verification, and maybe with the way they presented the argument, we don't think it's supportable. They do, but there's another option in the statutes that allows for us to validate a lot that would have otherwise been created lawfully had it gone through the correct process, partition back in the day. So oftentimes we'll identify that as an option for folks, and sometimes people say, no, we like our chances with this legal lot for whatever reason, and they move forward with that.
So you call that a partition process?
A validation of the unit of land.
Validation.
Yeah.
Got it. Thank you.
Again, so there's statutory deadlines with these things, so oftentimes, we're trying to work with the applicant, trying to get them to yes on an application, and we might need more time to evaluate information that they've supplied, oftentimes at the last minute. If they don't grant a time, and they drive the timeline extensions, we can't require an extension. So if they don't provide that extension and they want a decision, oftentimes that decision has to be a denial, unfortunately, on otherwise approvable applications. And then the last thing I'll talk about is that we do see creative applications sometimes. There's a number of reasons for this, but I will say that we're seeing more and more applications that just don't look like the straightforward legal lot applications that we've seen in the past. There's been a tendency in Lane County to use the legal lot verification process to not circumvent, but an alternative path to creating subdivisions. Folks will find multiple legal lots. They'll go through a series of property line adjustments. They'll create these rural subdivision on forest or farmland without having to go through the partitioning process. And I'll just give you one example of one of the things we see. You hear it a lot. I don't hear this term used in other counties, but here we see it a lot. It's this idea of a seed lot or a pop-up lot. It's this concept that, hidden within the assessor's map are all of these old property line adjustments and movements and land sales and things. And these create these sort of transactions over time that may have created a legal lot. This property was sold before land division regulations to, your neighbor. It's since maybe moved or been reconfigured, but there's an underlying legal lot hidden there that folks will mine, try to find those legal lots, bring them to the surface, and develop those parcels. Some of the searching for these legal lots has gotten really creative. There's been instances where there's just a very small sliver of land that wasn't created through a legitimate land sale, but it's just one example is the equipment used back in the day, the rods and chains, the meets and bounds descriptions, it just wasn't that accurate. And nowadays they have, like a total stations that cost 20 grand and use GPS, and they can really get that precision. And we find that there might be gaps in the surveys because of just inaccurate measurements back in the day. Well, applicants have tried to say, well, there's a sliver created there. That's a legal lot. So that's an example of something that we'll deal with from time to time. So again, why is this an issue here? I think there's a lot of reasons. You heard testimony today saying that none of these reasons are particularly specific to Lane County, and I would disagree with that. I think we have a very unique situation here. Part of it stems from, of course, from our code that isn't very specific, as Amber will discuss. We've gone through efforts before to make our code more clear and objective and provide some clear guidelines on what can and can't be a legal lot. That hasn't, we haven't succeeded in that yet. So we do have this environment where a lot of these things can be argued and these creative cases can be made. We also have a lot of really highly skilled professional individuals, some of who used to work at the county processing legal lots for years, who know how to go through this process, know how to work it. And so we have a lot of experts here that understand the process. You also have a very active land use watchdog group here, and that generates a ton of appeals, and the data will show just how dramatic that is. There's, of course, the past practices years and years ago. The county didn't take as careful a look at legal lots, and we've since been appealed and overturned on some of those past practices, and those have changed. And not all of the agents and representatives of applicants have kept careful track of some of those cases, and so it's a surprise to some folks. But staff follows the law as it evolves. Of course, in Lane County, we have a highly constrained land base. We have we've talked about this before, one of the most restrictive counties in the state, with all the 19 statewide planning goals applying here, lots of floodplain and riparian areas and high value farmland. So there's just not a lot of developable land, and it's worth a lot of money, and people spend a lot of time trying to develop that land, and legal lots are a prime way to do this. So it's ripe for these types of cases. So we don't see that a lot on the east side, where there's more land and legal lots aren't as hard to come by. Let's see.
Not to mention 2/3 of our land's federal and state land, which is not a lot.
That's a great point.
Right, yeah.
And again, this is just an example. I don't want to get into this, but there's been plenty of case law out of Lane County that has affected how we treat these things. So these have resulted, as this new case law changes, it's a surprise. Folks appeal these decisions, so it's just sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy, if you will. Now I want to get into the appeal data. The board gets a quarterly report on how our decisions are treated at the hearings official, LUBA, Land Use Board of Appeals, Court of Appeals. The board has been presented different information over time. I've come to the board in the past and shown data showing that in the last several months, we've been affirmed on 100% of our decisions. You've heard testimony from some attorneys saying that we're overturned on 70% of our decisions. It's how you look at the data is a big part of that. We engaged the Office of Data and Analytics to really look neutrally at all of our appeal data over the last 5.5 years and present it in a way that I think makes sense and is a very accurate picture of what's going on here. So
Excuse me, Keir, the Office of Data Analytics?
yes,
And where is that? Who is that?
that is housed at Lane County.
At Lane County.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, tight
This
So
Tina.
it's home.
Finance group.
Home.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we handed over all our data. They created some excellent information for us. So as you can see, in the last 5.5 years or so, we've issued almost 1,000 decisions. Again, 81% have been approved, 18% have been denied. There's some discrepancy in the total numbers just because some applications have been withdrawn or dismissed on appeal. So there's not, those numbers don't add up exactly when you look at the data below, but we have an appeal rate of about 21%, and then an overall reversal on the total number of decisions that we have of about 5%. What's interesting is that, I've broken this down into all of our appealable land use decisions, all of those applications except for the legal lots and then the specific legal lot data, so you have that. Of the decisions that are not legal lots, we deny about 10% of those applications. There is a higher denial rate on legal lot applications. I just want to be clear about that. That's some interesting information out of the data, and I think for the reasons I just discussed earlier about the creative applications and whatnot, that explains that. So we have about a 10% denial rate. Overall, 4% of those decisions are reversed. Now, this is just legal lot data. You can see that 31% of legal lot applications are denied. So there is a much higher denial rate. A larger percent are appealed, and there's only a slightly higher reversal rate, 7% as opposed to 5% on legal lot reversals.
Is that HO and LUBA or?
This is through the entire process. So if we went to the Supreme Court, basically what Data and Analytics did is they didn't hash out, you were approved at the hearings official, you lost at LUBA, but then you were ultimately approved at the Court of Appeals. They just look at the end result. What was the final decision? Like, what was the county's decision affirmed or remanded or reversed? This breaks it out, our approval versus our denial rate. And here you can see some of that information I was talking about. 10% of decisions that are approved are appealed, while almost 70% that are denied are appealed. This is the track record I mentioned with our new hearings official. Yeah.
Sorry, can you back to the other side just to make sure I'm tracking how you're, on the denied side, of the 69% that are appealed, is the 30% of appealed permits reversed 30% of 69?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
And then again, with our new hearings official, this data doesn't show in those numbers yet, but we've gotten a handful of decisions from them, and so far that track record is 100% affirmed with 2 decisions still waiting to be decided. I also want to provide some data from the Land Use Board of Appeals because there has been some testimony again about whether our hearings officials are making the best decisions. So these decisions are often appealed up to the next level, the Land Use Board of Appeals. Overall, LUBA remands or reverses over 50% of county or city's decisions. So almost majority of the time they're sending decisions back to the local jurisdiction. It's 55% of the time. We're less than half that. We're 27%. So we have, just about 3/4 of our decisions are affirmed when they reach LUBA. So overall, our track record is better than the rest of the state at LUBA.
is this legal lot verification, or are we back to all
This is
land
all
use?
legal, yeah. But I will point out that Lane County is just about the most prolific respondent at LUBA. So a lot of these are our decisions, and a lot of them are legal lot decisions as well.
We get the frequent flyer card is what you're saying with Luba.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Right, okay.
And if we want to talk about appeals local, just the last year, you can see we're the biggest respondent at LUBA last year with about, I think, 17 or 18 cases. City of Eugene has a few for cities. Deschutes County and Clackamas County both have a number of cases at LUBA. And what's interesting is Deschutes County has a Central Oregon Land Watch, so they have an equivalent of what we have here. And of course, up in the metro area, there's 1,000 Friends are very active with Clackamas County. So there's a correlation you can see there.
Before you move on, can you point out that the scale is different on those? So City of Eugene is only up to 3.
Yeah, 3, right. Thanks for
whereas,
that.
You know, the scale was up to 20 on the other one.
Yeah, thanks for pointing that out. And then in the last year, you can see who the appellants were. It's pretty clear, 1,000 Friends of Oregon, Central Oregon Land Watch, and again, Land Watch Lane County. So why do we have so many appeals here? I think this data is pretty compelling. We also deny a lot of applications on legal lots, and then that is not Land Watch appealing those. That's generally the agent or the attorney for the applicant.
So a question here, Keir. So what you're saying is that we have basically watchdog groups that are driving these statistics higher than what normal counties have, but don't have those watchdog groups. So I'm wondering if there's ever been a legal precedent or a challenge to only involving the stakeholders of the property and not an outside watchdog group, if that's ever been challenged. I'm not saying that, we're making a communistic state here or anything. I'm just wondering if it's ever been challenged that these aren't players in the system and why should they participate?
Yeah, so the legislature, almost every legislative session tries to narrow the scope of who can appeal LUBA decisions to, like you're saying, more people who arguably have a stake in the actual case. And consistently, it just hasn't gone through the legislature. It would have to be a legislative change.
Gotcha, thank you.
Can I follow up on that? So what does it get to in the legislature? I was in the legislature, I don't remember that.
The legislature's created LUBA, so it determines what LUBA gets to decide. And early on, the decision was that this huge universe of people got to play at LUBA.
And my question was, you say it comes up often in the legislature, so every legislative session is considered? Is that what you're saying?
Often, Rob would know more kind of how often, but there's lobbying to make LUBA less available to everyone in the world.
How does it come up in the legislative sessions?
Typically, the bills that I've seen have come from the party not in power to try to really limit the scope of what LUBA can prevent. It came up even early on in my legislative career, largely driven by folks wanting to increase housing production, to be honest. That's what
And so
I've
the
seen.
people who don't want to increase housing production would be the party in power, thereby squelching it each time.
Well, yeah, essentially the groups that are essentially the watchdog groups would not be in favor of
With
this.
more people having houses. Okay.
Well, no, well,
No.
see how he did that?
Oh, yeah,
He's
saw how
not
he did
good at some words.
Well,
but
tell me it's
yes.
not true.
Right.
not true.
But yeah.
Okay.
It's a fair point. Another way to get at that question, I think, has to do with what is an appealable decision to begin with. Legal lot applications where there is discretion involved, that is a land use decision that is noticed to the neighbors and appealable. We do have a type 1 process. We've tried to simplify it where, like, if you meet the certain criteria, we can just review this without opportunity for appeal. We'd like to see more of those. In the past, we've worked to update the code to create more of those opportunities. I'll just say that not everybody who you would at first think would be opposed to that is opposed to that. I mean, when there's an opportunity for more legal lots, if you make it more ambiguous, people want to provide the most options available. Yeah.
We need to take a step back on the legislative thing. What I'm trying to get to the the point I'm trying to get to here is if the legislature, every session or often, wants to say that only the people who live adjacent to the property or the property owners are the ones who have the stake. Is that what we're saying? And each time you said the party not in power. Now, when I was in the legislature, it was different.
It was different, yeah.
And that being said, what is different now is that because the party in power doesn't want it to go forward, it doesn't go forward. I mean, that's
Yeah, I'm loath to characterize intent, but I have seen bills, as Council Davies mentioned, over the years attempting to narrow the scope of LUBA review, and I haven't seen any of those gain traction, and the opponents generally come from the what did you call them? Watchdog groups.
Yeah.
Thousand Friends of Oregon, for example, is not real interested in limiting LUBA's jurisdiction. I think I can say that safely.
I think you can say that safely, yeah. And Central Oregon Land Watch.
I'm not as familiar with them. I'm more familiar with Thousand Friends of Oregon.
And the net result is sometimes they're right, sometimes they're wrong. And if they're wrong, houses don't get built, which otherwise would have been built. So that's okay.
Thanks for that curveball. Go ahead.
And I just want a few final thoughts on appeals. In general, I just want to say that we recognize this costs a lot of money to the public. It costs us a lot of money. We try to avoid these whenever we can. We can't always do that. We don't always know when an application will get appealed, and sometimes it's a curveball for us. We'll be relying on a court case or a decision where an attorney, maybe they're the actual applicant in a decision before us, they've argued one position in the past. Our position to approve or deny the application may be relying on that decision that they argued, and then they turn around and they argue a different position because it suits the case in front of them. So, you know, we can't predict when we'll get appealed. We do our best based on the information that's in front of us. We've also seen hearings officials backtrack on previous cases, or maybe there's a slightly different fact pattern. Staff read a decision as, you know, standing for one position, and a hearings official will modify the way they view it. So we've approved or denied an application based on what we think is a standing decision, and it gets overturned. A really good example of this would be a big issue that came up several years ago was this concept of roads dividing land. So if a road ran through it, you had legal lots on either side. Staff approved an application based on this longstanding practice that roads divide land. It was appealed. We were overturned. The next time we came through, we approved, we denied an application based on that last decision. That one was appealed, and then we were overturned on that. So we have 3 losses right out of the gate, and we're just bouncing back and forth trying to rely on the decision in front of us. So it's often out of our control, you know, whether we're affirmed or denied. That's why even though the data looks strong in the county's favor that we make good decisions most of the time, I've cautioned the board in the past, and I'll do it again, that this isn't the best benchmark for evaluating whether or not, you know, staff is getting it right. Oftentimes it means very little in the grand scheme. With that, I'm excited for Amber to talk about some of the things we can control and some of the improvements we are making. She'll guide you through the next couple of slides, and we'll wrap up with questions.
So in terms of programmatic improvements, in March, we mentioned that we've added one FTE, an engineering analyst position, to the program that processes property line adjustment, validation, and new land and legal lot applications. And since that time, I'm happy to share that timelines have improved in Q1 of fiscal year 2025. We're seeing applications from the time that they're deemed complete to the time that a decision is issued. That is at day 64. So we always talk about issuing decisions by day 70, and staff continue to work to bring those down, even more so in Q2. And then additionally, bringing on the additional FTE, our new engineering analyst position when they're available. Recently, we've implemented that they are going out to the planner on duty counter and meeting with applicants to review applications at time of intake. So having those additional staff resources helps to support that. And with that, they're able to look at the application and determine if there's any glaringly incomplete items and identify that right on the spot and let applicants know. So hopefully that helps to smooth the process and shorten the time frame to deem things complete. It might save an applicant the time to learn about, if they learn about the item later and then need to go obtain, say, certified deeds from a different office, and so they can know about it right at the time of application submittal and avoid an incomplete letter potentially. As Keir mentioned, we often regularly meet with county council. We have carved out check-in time to review complex legal lot issues and more often legal lot denials because those are often appealed. Staff really emphasize the importance of issuing defensible decisions. And we're grateful to have county council as a resource, especially when there's competing cases that we're navigating, case law changes, and there's not necessarily a clear answer in all instances. We've made updates to the planning webpage, including posting copies of historic ordinances. Those remain available at Deeds and Records, but we've also made our copies available so that applicants can go navigate through things that they might need to address in an application. We've posted more application materials online to save interested parties a trip to our office. It used to be the case that not as many of the application materials in a file were online, and then applicants would need to come talk with the planner on duty to check out the file and view them in our office. We have also posted a list of hearings, official decisions, and outcomes on our website, and we're regularly updating that. We've updated our decision format several years ago to include graphics to help explain and support understanding of staff's written analysis and of historic conveyances. And then just pivoting a little bit, and this will touch on the last bullet, so to talk about some code improvements that we're working on. So we have the ongoing code modernization work that we're doing. On our list of forthcoming code amendments is to work on Lane Code Chapter 13 for housekeeping legislative amendments and other amendments that we're aware of. And a key aspect of this project will be doing public involvement, hearing from our stakeholders about their concepts for amendments, and then working through draft code with the Planning Commission, who will then make a recommendation to the board. As pointed out in attachment 1 of the board's packet, one possible policy option is to amend the minor shift definition. So that would have the effect of changing the threshold at which replat or tentative partition would be required instead of a simpler property line adjustment application. This distinction is intended to require another round of review for land division when there is a significant enough change, like looking at things like safe access, access to utilities, protection from certain natural hazards. And I will note that since 1983, we have had some threshold in place that distinguishes, creates a two-track process. So since 1983, there was a definition of minor replat and major replat. That definition was somewhat ambiguous, and so in 2018, there was work done to Chapter 13 to define the term minor shift. That was done with significant public involvement with stakeholders, working with the Planning Commission in multiple work sessions, and then ultimately the current definition was adopted in 2018. That, however, it's a policy decision, and we're happy to receive board direction if the board would like to take another look at that definition and whether that is at the right threshold of 25% of the change of the smaller property. In your packet, well, also in attachment 1, is the memo analyzing code amendment recommendations of the Howman Consulting Report. This memo discusses that there's a number of recommendations that might be inconsistent with law, non-substantive, or otherwise unadvisable. But there are some options, however, that County Council has identified to be legally possible, including policy options for the board's consideration. So already mentioned the minor shift option. Another option is a call-up procedure if the board is interested to hear more quasi-judicial appeals, more hearings official decisions. And there's various forms of a call-up procedure. So we've looked at other counties' processes, and there are options to review, call up different types of applications. Another county presents different appeals to their board. There are different questions and considerations around that, such as what can be called up. And there's other options for board appeals. And so we've reviewed that in 3 work sessions with the board in 2024. And should the board wish to review more quasi-judicial decisions, the board could direct staff. We would be happy to receive direction to pursue code amendments, or as an initial step, return for further work session to discuss this policy option. I will just note there, as previously discussed in those work sessions, there are a number of considerations, such as time and resources involved, and there are positives too. So that process can help and has helped in the past to catch an error, clarify findings, clarify or even change a policy position of a decision. And then there's the potential for deference at LUBA with the board issuing a decision. As a related piece, and Keir touched on this a bit already, but to touch on it a little bit more. So in 2018, staff worked extensively with local consultants, and several work sessions with the Planning Commission were held on defining different discrete scenarios that could, without exception, result in a legal lot approval. But despite extensive efforts by really all parties, it was considered at that time that some or all of the options proposed to be codified were at best problematic when you looked at state law and case law. So this consideration came at a time when the county was receiving an uptick of appeals of approved legal lot decisions, and then ultimately it was recommended by staff and the board elected not to adopt these different discrete scenarios for legal lot approval. What was adopted ultimately was the Type 1 legal lot application process for properties that are created prior to 1949 and that have not changed configuration. But unfortunately, while the intent there was to create a simpler process, while we implemented it, it came to light that these applications are rarer than hoped due to the more discretionary nature of a lot of the legal lot applications. So in short, while staff have worked over the years to find simplicity in the process, there has been some challenges due to state law and historic ordinances, deeds, case law, and new appeals. And then there was also a process change recommended in the Howman Consulting Report that appears feasible. That is to report more frequently on appeals, such as monthly, and we would be happy to receive direction from the board to increase the frequency of appeal outcomes or even to change the format of that to receive any feedback that the board may have on that reporting and how it's done. And then lastly, I'll note, as noted in the memo, that there's a connection between legal lots and rural development, as a legal lot is often a precursor to development. And while the legal lot process is not a means to create a new legal lot, state law, the Oregon Administrative Rules do offer an option for upzoning in unincorporated communities that is an additional option above what's available outside of urban growth boundaries and unincorporated communities. So the board has adopted Blue River, so that's an example of where that's been done. Lane County has 33 other unincorporated communities that don't have community-specific plans. It offers an option to assess which communities might be viable candidates if they can meet the criteria of the Oregon administrative rules. That said, this process could be resource intensive, be a multi-year process, and long-range staffing is limited. And we have a number of mandated code amendments that we're working on. And so with that, staff have begun a scorecard to assess which communities could be good candidates that we could, that would inform future community planning. And with that, I will turn it back to Karen.
I apologize, we are slightly over time with some of the questions, but want to give you all an opportunity to ask those questions, so.
Great, thank you very much. To the board? Yes, Commissioner Buck.
Following up with your very last statement regarding the upzoning, I think there was a lot of interest by the board previously, and you mentioned a scorecard. So I was very curious what that scorecard encompasses, and how we could eventually move forward. I understand, as there always is, there's resource constraints, capacity constraints, but I viewed it as very, very successful for the community. I'm still working towards actual development after the implementation, but how can we move forward with that with the staffing levels that we have, and what's the scorecard design? How does that work?
Sure.
So there's a certain criteria that have to be met in the Oregon administrative rules, such as adequate water and soil capacity, and that looks at the community capacity on the cumulative level. And so there's certain factors that we can review, and we are doing so, such as whether the soils present in a community might qualify for a septic system, or whether they're known to be problematic soils, whether the area is identified as a water quantity or quality limited area, and then there could be other considerations as well, such as whether there's adequate transportation infrastructure, schools, things like that. And so what we're actively working on is to finalize that scorecard at the direction of the board. We would be happy to present that and weigh options, and then I would foresee as a next step would be community involvement to engage the communities and their interest level and their input and whether they would like to proceed with that type of project, and then from there we could determine how to fit into the long-range work plan.
Great, thank you.
I thought you were married. That's why I was waiting. Go ahead.
So what criteria do you currently use to move things to the board? I mean, if we were going to get involved in more things coming to the board, what sort of parameters would we set? I took a note. My reader said something about, did he say Choctaw case? I was hoping I spelled that right. He said that was being elevated, but he didn't want that one elevated. I haven't heard anything about it. So, how are those decisions currently being made?
So the code has a number of criteria that the board adopted to determine, what kind of decisions reach that level.
Threshold.
There's, the issue will reoccur with frequency. That's one. And a lot of these issues that are coming up more and more, we're starting to identify these patterns that they are reoccurring with frequency, so we will be recommending these come to the board. There is, deference involved, like there's the ability for the county to have deference. It involves a Gold 5 resource at the recommendation of the planning director, I believe the hearings official. So there are some criteria already. With the Choctaw case, that was a situation where we thought, wow, this has a significant impact, that decision, and we think the board should weigh in on this. I know Amber has touched base with Mr. Reeder about his other cases, and we think there makes sense to recommend at least one of them, I'm not super familiar with the other, about whether or not that has some countywide significance, and if that should go to the board.
Gotcha. And then we were talking about LUBA back and forth a little bit, but right now, I mean, LUBA appears to have ruled in favor with constituents more than the county. Is it? I mean, I didn't really see that on your numbers, but from what I was hearing and what the Howe Mann report said, that LUBA had actually ruled. Is that not the case?
I mean, if you look at the data going back the last several years, that's not the case. The numbers are, that we're getting affirmed or not reversed or remanded, the majority, like 75% of the time. And what that data actually didn't show, which I think it would actually improve our position, is those applications that are withdrawn somewhere along the line. So that's another thing I didn't touch on, is like when we are at an appeal stage and staff have presented their position, sometimes the hearings official or LUBA might telegraph their position on something, and oftentimes, an applicant will withdraw the application. And in our mind, that's like something that we probably would have prevailed on anyways. And so I don't think that data, that might have been from just a window of time, like I was talking about, where there might have been 3 or 4 decisions over a short period of time that we lost on at LUBA, but overall, the vast majority we get affirmed on.
So do we have a slide here of, say, 2020 to 2024, 2025 of just between the county and LUBA? That's all just
That's all
stabilized.
jurisdictions.
Right.
There is, so Office of Data and Analytics put together a dashboard, and that does have some information showing what the decision was at each decision maker point, so we could provide that data for you.
Yes, that would be helpful.
And just to clarify, not Court of Appeals, just LUBA, or do you wanted anything beyond the hearing official level?
Well, yeah, I mean, whatever you think might be helpful, actually.
Do you have that one inside the pie chart? I think that was-
Didn't see it.
I'll note that there have been some decisions where LUBA issues one opinion and then Court of Appeals issues a different opinion. So it has occurred in some windows of time where things can be read different ways, and they're very dynamic, which makes it hard to predict.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Anyone else? Yeah, Commissioner Farr.
Thanks. Kira, I was intrigued by something that you said. We recognize there's room to do better in regards of helping people find a way to yes. And clearly in Oregon land use, which is very complicated, and it's complicated more by appeals and challenges. It continues to be more so my question is, when you say that we realize there are ways to do better, helping people find yes, in land use decisions, there's been an allegation, not an allegation, but a supposition that the first point at which we find no, then that's the answer, and that you give to the applicant and say, I think the words have been used, go try again. And so they refile and try again and say, no, that's no also, go try again. Rather than helping them find what is the a legal way to make your project work. Now, is that what you're talking about when you say there's room to do better, Keir?
Yeah, I don't know that I would agree that we just tell them to try again. I think that there's, now that we have more resources, for example, we can provide more front-end consultation to try to help people get there. So that's what I mean when I say there's room for improvement. I don't think it's an attitude thing. I think it's a resource thing, if anything.
I certainly hope it's not an attitude thing, but and a resource thing is a finite. I mean, your resources are finite. You can't go out of the way to you can't take resources from one place just to apply to another place and not lose out in wherever you take the resources from. But that being said, I'm interested in helping people determine, is there a legal way to yes? And the supposition, once again, is that if there is a legal way to yes, we should be able to help people identify it. Are you pretty confident that we do that?
Yeah, I mean, I do think we do that. I'll also point out that there's often, there's the broader community, there's the applicant, and then there's the broader community. And sometimes it's the neighbor who is opposed to an application. And staff has to balance their viewpoint. They hear from that neighbor, and that neighbor may make arguments, and we have to represent that fairly. So it's not that we can just wholly try to advocate. We have to, and again, our client is the county, it's future generations, it's people who rely on the land use system, it's the whole. So we're not the advocate for an applicant, but we certainly want to help them through the process to the extent we can fairly.
And if there's a legal way to wade through the process, you're confident that we're helping people find the legal way. Now, you say often it's the neighbor who has an issue, which I don't think anybody has a problem with. If the neighbor has an issue, that seems to be a legitimately interested party. But sometimes it's not the neighbor, is it? Sometimes it's somebody who maybe has never even seen the lot that's making the...
And sometimes those watchdog groups might represent the neighbor, but sometimes they just get involved because they have an interest in the decision.
And this is what we were talking about earlier, that the legislature has no interest in narrowing the group of people who are considered to be the stakeholders. I think that's what was said. The legislature has no interest in narrowing the group of stakeholders. Is that a true statement?
Or has not in the past, put it that way.
Okay. All right. So, and that would have to be the legislature. That's not something we could do at the county level. Say any appeals to a land use application have to be from a neighboring property or from the property owner. Is that something we can do at the county level, or do we have to wait for the legislature on that?
It's a state issue partly because of, so land use has the DLCD column and it has the statute column. And DLCD is the one who created the goals, and goal 1 is citizen participation. So that's why it's so hard to get the legislature to act on these efforts to narrow the scope of the standing at LUBA.
So because of goal 1, anybody can appeal in that.
Well, it supports that.
Supports it. Has it been challenged?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, the legislature's continued to try it and it just hasn't gone. And I think partly the reason why it hasn't succeeded is because of goal 1.
Okay. Okay, good. That's a good explanation. Thank you. That makes it very, very clear. So that goal 1, this is an involvement element of it, is a part of the reluctance of the legislature to move forward. And can I consider that you're saying that that's why the county cannot move forward, is because of goal 1?
I'll mention, there was a decision in 1989 that where it was found that a preliminary legal lot verification was not a final land use decision. Then in 2004, we created a procedure to begin to notice the preliminary legal lot verifications, and then in 2010 we integrated that into the code as a one-step procedure. If we were to revisit that process, then I think what you would have is the effect of a preliminary legal lot verification where there's not a guarantee. It's not a final land use decision, and so if we were to issue that, it could later be challenged when someone needs to apply for a land use application, like a land division or a dwelling application or a special use permit. Then they wouldn't have that legal lot question resolved. It would be that land use application would be open to appeal if it required lawfully establishing of land.
Okay.
So maybe there's options and we could look into them further, but that's just my initial
Then
reaction.
I'm going to let's hold that statement in debate. Maybe there are options that we can look at in the future. And once again, the helping people find yes on property that they feel that they would like to build on is what I'm very interested in. And if we can do it, if there's a legal way to do it, if there is a legal way to build on a piece of property in Lane County, we should allow people to build it if there's a legal way to do it. And we should facilitate them knowing the legal way. Which I think you're agreeing with.
Yeah. And if I could try to respond to your question about, is it the legislature that's holding us up? Again, I'll defer to legal counsel on that, but I think generally that's my understanding. I'll also point out that This isn't our first rodeo with this issue. As Amber mentioned, back in 2018, we talked about legal lots in depth, and one of the issues, as I recall, that came up was this very issue. And as I also recall, there was some change in the code at that time which required an applicant to demonstrate that they have interest in the appeal process. There's something occurred around that time, and I can research it. But now what we see is a statement from one of these land use watchdog groups stating, for XYZ reasons, they have an interest in this. They're a citizen of Oregon, and they're invested in the...
I breathe air, so I'm interested. Okay.
Well, so I guess my point is that I think this has been researched in the past, and we've tried to take some steps in that direction, and that's the result.
Okay. And I'm interested in continuing to look at this because it seems counterproductive to our ability to allow people to build on lots where it is legal to build. Slowing down the process, and ultimately, in many cases, people just run out of time and or money, even though if they had the time and the money, ultimately they might find a way to get the job done. I think we should be in the business of facilitating that, of helping people find the right way to get it done, if there is a right way, and only stopping them, only saying dead end here if there is absolutely no legal way to build what they would like to build on the lot that they're trying to build on. So the two other quick questions. One is on deference. You mentioned that LUBA gives deference to a board decision.
When interpreting a local code.
When interpreting a local code. And so board decisions carry a great deal of weight with LUBA because the board is the elected body. Presumably the ultimate elected body, the decision-making, policy-making for the county, because whatever county it is, whether it's 3 or 5 board members, they are the ones who are elected by the people to make the decisions. Therefore, the deference given by LUBA is appropriate for local decisions. Okay, and so if the board were involved in more local decisions, then LUBA would have there'd be greater deference given at the LUBA level.
So, yeah, I just wanted to make a point that the deference is when the local decision is interpreting local code. It's not just any local decision.
Exactly. Yeah.
And that it's legally defensible as well. I mean, it could be challenged, obviously.
Certainly, and deference is not absolute yes, it's deference. It's, if it's a balance here, you get deference on that. Then the last thing, I made a note on this, Amber, in that you said that having a deed in hand doesn't mean you have a legal lot, period. So if I have a title or a deed that says that my lot is legal and some authority signed that, why would that not be?
So just by itself, it may very well be a lawfully established unit of land. The point I was making there is just that we don't know until we take a look at the time that the deed was recorded and whether that occurred before subdivision and partition regulations, if it predates zoning, or if it complied with zoning. So someone may have a deed in hand that has not gone through the legal lot process yet, and it could absolutely be a lawfully established unit of land.
So an old deed in hand that predates the ruling doesn't. It's not a actual valid piece of paper unless it complies with the ruling. So later rulings invalidate deeds.
Well, so the process in place is if the deed predates, per Chapter 13, if the deed predates 1949 and it has a changed configuration and the evidence is clear and objective, it's not discretionary, then it can go through that Type 1 process. If not, then it would go through the Type 2 process. Unfortunately, case law evolves, and we do have to apply case law of LUBA and Court of Appeals, and so if something does change, then we would need to apply that to the evaluation in a legal lot verification. That's not to invalidate, the effect of the deed that someone has in place, but it's just for the purposes of whether something's a legal lot or a lawfully established unit of land, that then we would need to apply.
You clarified that, thank you. I'm still struggling with the fact that if I have a deed, it's only valid unless it's verifiable.
Well, the deed is that you own the land. It just may not have the rights of a lawfully established unit of land under state law. So you own the land, You just may not, and that's why when you sign title, there's, a disclaimer on there that says, check with your local, planning office to make sure you can develop this land in all the ways you want to. And that's on there specifically recognizing that just because you own it doesn't mean that it's a lawfully established unit of land and that your goal will comply with the zoning regulations.
So you're saying it says that on all deeds that,
Say it on all the deeds.
Does now.
Does
Didn't
now.
then,
Does now, it
didn't
didn't
back
then.
then.
so the back then is just a piece of paper.
Yeah, so if when the land use regulations were in effect, I decided to take a piece of my property and sell it to Amber, she has that deed. So that deed, and all she's saying is that deed itself is not enough. That the planning staff needs to look at that deed and look at the history and figure out whether it was lawfully created or not.
Thanks for wading through that with me, because, that's an item of clarity that's really important to me. So if parents say, we're going to divide our land among 4 kids, and they give them the deeds of the 4 kids, then it's not necessarily.
Right, and that's what happens a lot.
Okay, good.
It hasn't gone through the land division process. So. And then the other piece of that is, and some of that was brought up in public testimony this morning, that the county should just make a presumption that that deed is good, that's, why does the county need to verify those, that it went through the process? Somebody hands you some information, you should just you should out of the gate assume it's a lawful, legally created unit of land. And we have an obligation, though, to review that deed and make sure it's accurate. And we've been sort of admonished by the courts and even the state legislature when we haven't gone through the process properly to determine that deeds we've been presented are valid. And I think the board is aware of the situation where there was a local land use attorney who was probably the most prolific applicant when it came to legal lot applications, and appellant submitted information to the county about a decade ago, submitted some deeds. Those deeds turned out to be fabricated. The county didn't, go through a very rigorous review back then, and it created a lot of hardship for the neighbors. And so, in the appeals of that, the county was kind of told, like, you really should be looking hard at these instruments, and so that's our requirement to do that now.
Okay, thanks. I've taken that down, and then, so when people ask me about that, I'll refer to exactly what we said here. In fact, I'll review the verbatim transcript of this discussion, and that's what I'll use to answer people's questions. Thank you.
Sure.
I just had one quick question that came up. You said clear and objective proof, then you also said 1949 in the same sentence. How do you get proof from 1949
So
that was a legal lot?
So we look at deeds or land sales contracts that predate that time, or some other evidence that isn't discretionary, that there's clear evidence on the deed that it created the property, and there wasn't question, I can't think of an exact example right off the top of my head, but there wasn't evidence that there was conveyances. We have enough information from parent properties to show that it did predate land division regulations.
So
1949 is the first time that the county adopted the ordinance regulating subdivisions.
And generally, it can be, as close to a slam dunk as possible. If you have an old deed, it describes a piece of land. There's no other, on the property description card, there's no other transactions that have made adjustments or modifications. And the description that it was back then is the same description now. You look at the maps, it's all the same. Like, that's pretty straightforward and easy. Then it can be fairly clear and objective at that point. But if there's other, transactions that have occurred, there's other entries on that property description card of this happened here and this property boundary was adjusted, then it gets harder and harder to make a clear determination.
I know we're over time. A couple of the questions already been answered. Just curiosity, no pun intended, but can a super site create a legal lot?
It can and has prior superseding bills.
Okay, great, that's awesome. Curiosity just kind of popped up. On the board directions that you asked for, the minor shift definition, yeah, I think the board would like to, I would like to have head nods on that if the board would do that. And create a board call-up process for appeal decision, I think that's appropriate to maybe start work on. I'd like to see that happen. And the upzoning, as Commissioner Buck said, I'm super curious about that and would like to see a couple of those maybe come across our desk pretty soon that we could be working on. At least we have some visionary goals for that. And then the last question I had really quick was just the idea we floated a while back about a 3-person committee that would help aid in some of that decision of what board cases would be called up. And that 3-person committee consisted of a planning director, a citizen volunteer, and a PLSO rep. And I know I'm not supposed to use acronyms, and it's the Land Survey Organization. What's the P for?
Public Land Survey.
There you go. Thank you very much. We got that figured out. Yeah. So I was just curious if that would help in that objectivary process of getting a decision for the board to look at a case. So maybe that committee could be handed off, and you wouldn't be burdened with that extra time and staff. So I don't know if that's a question or more of my thoughts, but thank you very much. Anything else?
Just one last thing, that you gave us a slide, I love this slide, I'm gonna maybe put it on my wall. It said the issues staff's perspective, and you have 6 bullet points on there, which I'm gonna explore each one of them. Thank you.
All right, well, great. Thank you very much for joining us, team. Did a great job today. Thanks for the presentation and the analytic data. It was super great. And have a good afternoon, what's left of it, and enjoy the sun. Thank you so much. Our next item on our agenda is our technology services item. It's a work session with the cybersecurity status report. Is that true? Yes?
It is super exciting.
All right, well, welcome to the board, Kim Morgan, our County Information Security Officer, and I believe is Mike Finch just going to be in the cheap seat, so you're going to join us too, Mike?
I'm just going to sit out in the cheap seat.
Okay, sounds good.
That voice you hear.
Appreciate you very much. Kim, anytime you're ready, have a seat, and we'll get started whenever you're ready to go.
So the party in power is the one with the veto pen. And I think the last time that was somebody different, it was Vicatia.
By the way, I just checked the last 5 full sessions and I ran out of time. Identified a bill each session that proposed to limit Lewis standing.
The last 6.
Every session.
Wow. Okay.
So every session there's a bill introduced like that. Yeah.
Every session, there's lots of bills introduced that go nowhere.
Yeah.
That's because people are good at campaigning, not at legislating.
Yeah.
Because we don't have a limit on how many bills can be
And as
introduced.
you know, some
3,400.
are more prolific than others.
That's right.
Some introduce hundreds, others introduce a handful.
Some know,
One? In a session, you introduced one bill?
some know how to shepherd them and some do not. Some know how to work their bills and some do
That's
not.
also true.
Good afternoon. I guess I'm ready. You are?
Yes, we're ready, Ms. Morgan. Go ahead.
Well, thank you for your time this afternoon. Today is just a work session, kind of giving you an update on where we've been over the last 10 years since the Cybersecurity and Compliance Division of Technology Services was developed. So, start from the beginning. Our priority is to mitigate our risks with the available resources. Obviously, we can only do what we can with both people and resources. And this is just a fun fact that every 11 seconds, a business falls victim to ransomware. And they average about $5 million. And Curry County, for example, was a little over $5 million for the ransomware attack that happened. So that's an example. They're a very small county compared to us. Thanks. This is a nice family tree of what we do in cybersecurity. I know there's a lot on the slide, but basically we are the infrastructure, the organization pulls together the networks, the data, we pull together the strong passwords, we do the education. It's all of those things that make our organization whole, and we try to protect with all of the different tools and people that we've got in our division. This presentation is to kind of go over what we have accomplished in the last 10 years. A lot on the next few slides, and I can pull out a couple different things for each year that we did that I thought might be helpful. When I first started in 2016, one of the basic things we did is start encrypting our laptops. So when a laptop got stolen, nobody could use it. It was useless, it's a brick. that was one of the best things that we could do. It's also regulatory required for several different organizational things that we have to do here. So that was one of the first things that we were able to accomplish when I first got here. 2017, we were putting together the criminal justice information system and the healthcare HIPAA policies and trying to, again, bring them up to organizational standards rather than being so parsed between the different departments. And so being able to centralize some of that with the technology services team, that's something that I really made an effort to do, and partnering with the different, like the privacy officer over in Health and Human Services, the compliance officer over in the sheriff's office, and really meeting with those folks monthly to try to figure out how we can partner better to make sure that we're meeting those requirements. 18, we did the first step in the remote access policy. That was way before COVID, but we started doing that, and we had it multi-factor authentication for anybody that was entering our organization externally, one additional hop. So if somebody got your password, they couldn't quite get in, they could get to one step, but they couldn't get the second step. These are all baby steps that help us get to a place where we can mitigate the risks for people, because they are really trying to attack even the smaller or medium-sized counties. 19, we were working on strategy and risk mitigations through a risk assessment. We did our first HIPAA risk assessment, and that was eye-opening for the directors of both organizations, and that we have a lot of work to do. There's just a lot of work, a lot of policies, a lot of technical things that just are really difficult to do, so we got an assessment. And so that is the beginning of a work plan that we started working on. And then in 2020, of course, COVID happens. Well, world changes, goes upside down. So that was when we got about 1,800 people up in 3 weeks working remotely. So not we, the whole technology service department, we had a very focused effort, and we had people on site getting everybody up and working. And so that was at least we could keep providing community resources as best as we could with a whole new world we were trying to do. There were no policies in place for it, by the way. So we were just winging it, but we were doing it to the best, and we were trying to make it as seamless as possible. Again, leveraging multi-factor authentication. If you recall, you had to use your cell phone in order to hop on. So trying to mitigate those risks as much as possible, because people had to use their home computers. We didn't have 1,800 computers that were laptops that people could use that were a Lane County piece of equipment. So that adds vulnerabilities, and we did the best we could to improve on that.
It was remarkably smooth, from my perspective.
The team did amazing with what we had to figure out very quickly. Thank you. 2021, regular auditing assessment schedule. We applied for the Homeland Security Grant. We're awarded a $100,000 Homeland Security Grant to have yet another security assessment done, build a cyber action plan, which is required for cyber insurance. So that was a big key for us to do. And again, it reiterated the things that we'd accomplished since our 2018 assessment, and continued our work plan to move forward to, there's never ending cyber things to do. So just continues our list. Next slide. 2022, we partnered with the Multi-Estate Information Sharing and Analytics Center, and there are a lot of free tools that I'll be getting into later that are no longer free. But the malicious domain blocking, it blocks about 5,000 attempts on our organization every week. It's a tool that the MICISAC Multi-State Information Sharing and Analytics Center that they have been able to provide to the over 1,800 members of their community. And that is something that is huge, because we don't have the infrastructure or the funding for that, which we'll get to later. Cyber hygiene, we went through CISA on that, and that is making sure that our basics on our infrastructure are meeting the minimum requirements, that we're like, okay, when you get an email, those are when some of our emails are blocked. Our emails being blocked is because maybe the sender's information is not up to the current security patches, or they are potentially high-risk fish, meaning they're sending out hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of emails to one particular organization, and that seems very odd to our automated services. So these are some of the basics, again, that we try to get some bumpers in, so that when people do get those emails, and I ask you not to click on them without knowing specifically who they're from, we're just trying to help people help themselves so that we don't endanger our organization. Endanger is a strong word, but put us at risk. 2024, last year we had a big move to OneDrive. So over the last 5 years, we've moved from on-prem what I would say legacy, which is old stuff. Very old servers, very old hardware, because we used to buy it and you want to run it till it dies. Well, these days, it doesn't work that way because Microsoft, which is our tool of choice, is keeping us current so that we can keep these risks mitigated. So the old stuff kind of breaks these days when you do. So when we're trying to move to OneDrive, any place, anywhere, anytime. So from your laptops, you can go to office.com, you can get your OneDrive files now, whereas before you couldn't get your stuff on the H drive, for example. So again, making things somewhat more convenient. All has multi-factor authentication on there, so again, keeps that little bumper into place. But we're trying to make it, our work is getting harder, but if we can do some automated tools and make things more convenient, that's also what we're trying to do. Not only throw those road bumps or hiccups in that sometimes folks feel is an inconvenience, we're trying to make it easier for people to work as well. 2025, we are doing multi-factor authentication that you've heard me mention externally. We're now doing it internally. If you haven't done so, I'm happy to have somebody help you do so, because that needs to be done as soon as possible. That is an example of a couple months ago, we had that email compromise where we forced all employees to change the password that Friday evening at around 11 o'clock. Was because we did not have multi-factor put in everywhere, and that was creating vulnerability. So somebody got into somebody's email, pretended to be them, and then was starting to perpetuate. But because the person self-reported, immediately we're able to stop it. So the multi-factor wouldn't have fixed everything, but we're doing it on-premise as well now. It just is another tool that if Greg's trying to log into his computer, he knows he's going to get a ping on his phone or he's going to have whatever. If he gets a ping on his phone and he's not trying to log into his account, that's an alert that he's like, wait a minute. So that is something that we are wrapping up shortly. We're down, I got the counts this morning from our project manager. I think organizationally, HHS has a minor little bubble of 300 people that I'm going to take out of the numbers, but we're about 85-90% complete with the multi-factor authentication on site. So that has been a huge effort that we really appreciate everybody's effort on getting us to that point.
And you'll let the directors know where we still have outliers?
We are, and it's hard because, for example, CGRS is a small little bubble. 3 people, the percentage looks larger than 300 people. So that's why I loosely use the percentages. But we've made a huge thing. A lot of people are on administrative leave or maybe on maternity leave or vacation. So we are taking that into account. But we have made successful efforts in getting those done. And then another fun thing that, as you all are aware of, artificial intelligence is here and it's coming. And that is one of our biggest efforts that we're currently undertaking and are going to be going on into next year. So that was a lot of talking, but I kind of wanted to give kind of a highlight. Is there any questions on what I've shared so far?
Sounds good. Keep growing.
Thank you. So the basic foundation of our department is we're significant to the continuity of services, but it also we want to safeguard the community and reputational damage later. We don't want to be on the front page of an oopsie. Mind you, it isn't a matter of if, it is when. And we are doing our best to not be those folks, but what can we do to keep those boundaries up? And that's what I'd really like to do. So we've really worked on improving the technical debt that I had just recently talked about, the really old stuff. We're continuing to work on that and build work plans with the different departments. We're going out, we have our CAT managers, our customer alignment team, which are Kay and Nina, and they're going out to the different departments and working with them and trying to build a plan so that their old stuff, okay, it's old, how can we get it done in the next year or two rather than next week or two? An example would be the SharePoint vulnerability we had last week that I'm not sure that many of you necessarily know. We have some old stuff on our 2013 server, or 2013 SharePoint, which is on 2012 server. That's a 13-year-old server. No longer able to be patched. So vulnerabilities, we're accelerating, we are concluding some work to get the last stuff off of those 2013 SharePoint sites because it's a vulnerability to organizations. So we had to rework some of our staff this last week so that we can remove that vulnerability from the organization. So those are all things that's an urgent matter that we had to change. We're trying to plan more ahead with the departments and really working with them to do that in a planful way so it's not financially as impactful as well as, by the way, we're going to turn stuff off in 48 hours. So we're trying to be better about that. So this slide is also very busy, and this is what keeps me up at night. So these are all the things that we do in our little cybersecurity and compliance division. The items on the left are the 4 staff that I've got. The 2 top blue, or the 3 bubbles in blue, are the basic day-to-day things that we have to do, projects, initiatives. And then the regular tasks, we do everything from badging, so people get their new badges, all new employees get their new accounts. We work on projects, software vetting. That's a fun one. So software vetting, every new software that we get alerted to, we want to make sure that it meets the requirements of our regulatory requirements, whether it's personal identifiable information or criminal justice information, whatever it may be. We want to make sure that it meets those requirements before somebody says, hey, I've got the software, it's already installed, can you make it work? Because sometimes it might not work, again, depending on our infrastructure. We would like to get to auditing more. We really do more ad hoc auditing due to staffing time constraints. And we really do a lot of management in the Microsoft 365 Security Compliance Center. And that keeps us, again, our pulse on what's going on in our current Microsoft infrastructure and how things are going, whether it's email, whether it's software, whether it's people. We get risky login, risky users will say, oh, so-and-so is signing in from New York. But then a second later, they're signing in from Portland. That's a risky user. So then we take action and say, you know, hello, Commissioner Farr, are you really in New York or are you really in Eugene? If you're really in neither of those places, then we're saying, we're going to ask you to change your password, please, and we're going to do some research.
It was Vancouver, BC, actually.
Oh, so there you go.
I wasn't.
So yeah, so we tried that, and it's really more, and that's a reactive, we're not proactive. We have staff that work 40 hours a week, Monday through Friday. We don't have after hours or 24/7 support. So we do the best we can with we come in the morning, we're like, what do our alerts look like? And we address them in the priority of which the urgency is. On the right-hand side in the pink, that is the cyber action plan. Like I had mentioned in 2018 and 2021, we did the security assessments, and that helps us build our plans. And I actually skipped ahead a little bit. But you'll see Zero Trust. That is one of our infrastructure, Cheryl Reedy's team. Zero Trust, it sounds harsh. But it doesn't.
What about it sounds harsh?
Trust no one, but verify, please. But it really is, it's separating out our workstations from our servers so that I'm oversimplifying, but separating things out. So if I'm working on my computer and somebody gets into my email, they can't hop from my computer to the server that I may be managing. So we're trying to put internal, for our technology services staff primarily, additional hops that they have to do, which just like the rest of the organization, we have to put in extra passwords, extra credentials, we need to change our accounts. So we're really trying to separate things out so we can mitigate, again, those risks that people are just coming in sideways, and it's usually through email. Not always, but usually. And we probably could go to the next slide. I got ahead of myself. So I kind of already went through this in a less So you might have remembered my long word, Multi-State Information Sharing and Analytics Center, MS-ISAC Center. That is something that we have been a member of since 2010. Before I got here, I think Mike was here maybe, we applied for a grant and we were able to get Albert Sensor, which that is a tool that they put in our data center that provides the Multi-State Information Sharing and Analytics Center, MS-ISAC. They have 24/7 Security Operations Center. They know what their 18,000 members are seeing and getting hit with, or what the vulnerabilities are, or the ransomware, or the malware. And they can say, hey, Lane County, we see this attempt coming into your organization. This laptop, this person, Kim Morgan, whatever it is, we're seeing this on their thing, and can you go take a look at it? So we go take a look at it because we don't have that tool in our organization. I'll get to that in a second. So yeah, but it's also for all state, local, tribal, and territorial government organizations. That's what the MS-ISAC has been built around. The next slide has a lot of acronyms, and I apologize because I did take it from their own slide deck, so I know that we try to stay away from acronyms. But this is kind of a history of why they're now asking for membership dues. For the services we've been receiving for free for 10 to 5 years is now going to be at a cost for all organizations, because as of February this year, In March, they were shared that they cut funding. It was cut in 50%, $10 million. And so they had to come up with a creative way to still provide this service to the state, local, territory organizations. So these are the things that currently is being covered. They did fill the gap between February and September 30th. So we are still receiving these free tools. But basically the Albert Alerts, that's what I'm saying. We have 2 sensors in our network, and that tells us what's coming in. Inside it gets into our organization. We have the malicious domain blocking recording, and that is what we have actually set up a lot of blocking of different external countries. But this is an additional, it actually stops them and it tells you what it is, and they know who the bad actors are, and they can help us prepare if we were to get hacked by them. Endpoint Security Services, their Security Operations Center, their annual meeting, their nationwide cybersecurity review. This is currently in question. That is something that we feel every year that actually makes Lane County eligible to receive Homeland Security grants. They're talking about having us pay for that. So there's still a lot of unknowns right there. Cyber threat liaisons to CISA and classified facility operations. So all of this are things that we get emails on. We can attend meetings. The FBI is included in these. So we get a lot of information through these sources that are currently free.
Kim, sorry, would you happen to know some of those costs offhand? I mean, relatively?
Yes, so I'm going to kind of get there, but yes, so the this is what the membership is going to be, but to specific, if you want to go back, I can speak to it. Oh, there we go. So, for example, the Albert devices, I did just get a quote for that. That is going to be $39,000 for organizational size. But don't panic yet. We have a plan. Malicious domain blocking and reporting. That one I'm still waiting for a quote because originally it's going to be included maybe in the membership, and maybe it's not. The endpoint security services, we got a quote and that was close to $100,000. So these are things that are significant costs that, and those are just a few. If you'd like me to continue.
Well, you'd mentioned it when you were talking about this nationwide cybersecurity review. And
yeah, so they haven't, the state of Oregon is still really arguing on that one. I'm guessing all of the states are arguing on that one because they're requiring it for grants. But then they want to charge us for a requirement to submit a grant. So there's a cyber resilience committee at the state that is working really hard to, even if they include it in the grant cost, they're really trying to make it so that the organizations who are applying for grants, because we don't have money to maybe do the things we want to do, that we wouldn't have to pay for that service. So what is really challenging is, although in February, the federal cuts were announced, literally as of today, I had a meeting at noon, and they're still indecision on exactly what they're going to pay for or try to get us to pay for and what the costs are. So it is ever changing. However, now we'll move to slide 4.
Where does the money come from?
I'm sorry?
Where does the money come from? Which bucket?
It is coming, I don't know.
The money that they're taking away.
The money they're taking away was a federal cut to the multi-state information. I don't know which.
Is it DHS funding? Is it FCC funding? Is it DHS?
I'm guessing DHS.
Thank you.
I concur with my peers, phone friends. So what are the options for Lane County? So the top part that I highlighted, Tier 4, that's about where we are with our operating budget. So it'd be approximately $10,000 for the chunk of services that I do believe we are going to commit to. We are going to be penny pinching, getting in our couch cushions in technology services and security, and we are not asking for additional funding for that at this time. We can cover that for this year and ongoing. The concern that we do have, the Albert Alerts, I said that was a $39,000 quote. We have some new firewalls. We can redirect some of our staff time to do some reprogramming, and reprogramming is probably not the right word, but we can do some work that can build up a very similar tool that would not be a $39,000 a year cost. So that is something we're going to choose to do because we have updated firewalls now that we can build a lot of that in. Malicious domain blocking, like I said, Cheryl and her team did get a quote, and that it was estimated an additional $25,000 just to get it by a third party. I'm asking the Multi-State Information Sharing and Analysis Center to see what their quote would be, because often it's less because it is a massive governmental organization. So we're hoping that's what we're gonna do. So our intent is to subscribe. If we subscribe now, which we will, we'll get 18 months instead of 12 months by subscribing by September 1st. So that's what we're gonna do, because we don't have a 24-hour security operations center. We don't have those tools. We don't have the researchers that they have available, that we get those daily, weekly, monthly updates, those annual meetings that have all of those members of the United States in our pocket as they do. So we will intend to do this. Next. So this is, what are we doing? We're basically trying to check our, couch cushions. We're going to be penny pinching, buying less pencils. We're going to do what we can to get our membership minimally to get us through for the next 18 months. We don't know what that's going to look like for next fiscal year. We don't know what the MDBR, the malicious domain blocking, is going to look like. We don't know what the Security Operations Center stuff is going to look like, but we are doing our best to do with what we can with the tools we've got and the staff we've got. Where standard user is our next big effort with the Windows Hello effort. So these three things, with federal cuts, the multi-factor authentication, Windows Hello, and the standard user. That again is going to build us some basics for the end users. When you all go home, when you go from office to office, when our staff comes into our facilities, it's giving us some basics. So if they get into our email, the standard user is, you can do what you need to do your job, but you don't have local administrative rights anymore, so you can't download stuff. So you can't download stuff from the internet. We shouldn't be downloading, according to our APM, you shouldn't be downloading things unless you get our CIO's permission. So we're really just putting some teeth into those APMs we already have and really helping people help themselves through putting these tools in place. And I went a lot quicker. Do you have any questions?
Wow, very good. To the board. I'm going to marinate just for a moment. Yes, Greg, go ahead, please.
So one thing, I'd love to have this be part of our Monday noon, federal policy transition team meeting, because this has got to affect partners, at all levels, all across the state, all across the country. And I want to make sure we're doing everything we can to be positioned not only with lobbying, but with any kind of legal challenges that are going on.
One point that I didn't point out is the elections information sharing and analytics center. That is how a lot of the counties, we were one of the first counties to get that Albert sensor up until about 3 or 4 years ago. Then the state did for the rest of the county clerks, put that in place. So the elections area is really trying to work together to trying to find some basic support as well, and that is literally in flux, and I just got an email yesterday about that. So the organizations are really trying to pull together, the county clerks, the ISACs are all trying to pull together to try to see what they can do as little cost, because elections is a critical infrastructure.
Yep.
We want to make sure it's protected.
But let's bring it to the table and walk it through the front door in terms of our federal agenda to get support where we need it. Thank you.
All right. Looks like we're satisfied. Good work, and we're hoping that couch cushion yields some big quarters. Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you for your time.
You bet.
Actually, I'd like to say, your timeline is probably the most interesting part of the discussion today, about how far we've come since just 2016. And Michael, when did you come on board as a director? That was 15, wasn't it?
End of 2014, yeah.
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 Boy, the world has changed, hasn't it, since
That
that
was
day?
actually one of my first moves, was to help form the cybersecurity division.
I remember that. I remember, who is this guy? No,
Yeah.
all right. And it's exponential, the changes, isn't it?
It is. Every day, something new.
Yeah. Wow. I'm glad I have grandchildren to teach this stuff. So, yeah.
Thank you for your time.
Well, Ms. Morgan, Ms. Allen, thank you very much again.
Thank you.
Mr. Finch, thank you, sir. And Cheryl, I'm sorry. Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, thank you very much for coming. You guys are doing a great job back there. Continue doing the impossible. All right, we're going to regress just a little bit on our agenda, go back to item 5C, Mr. Rickoff's announcements. He's been patiently waiting, sir. Thank you very much. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Just a reminder, Steve is out. It will be back in the office on Friday. So he's out till then. He had home emergency that needed his attention, the loss of someone who's akin to a family member, and he's out there supporting the family. Wanted to do a quick response to the fair concerns. We put together the statement. This is coming out of Dan. We understand and appreciate the concerns that the county has received. Lane Event Center staff work very hard to host a county fair that is safe and welcoming for all of our visitors. We'll be discussing what transpired at this year's fair with the Fair Board and County Council's office. A challenge that we routinely face with the Lane Event Center is that it is a public facility, and we're limited in ways that we can restrict and use the grounds, including items to be sold under free speech protections. The booth spaces that are rented for the fair can be rented by a variety of organizations. These organizations choose to express their purpose or values in a variety of ways that do not necessarily reflect the endorsement of Lane County. We'll take the public comments we've received into consideration as we review the policies and contract language for use of the Lane County Center, including the fair. I do want to talk specifically about the chalk drawing that occurred. Please note that there was chalk drawings of statements on sidewalks outside of the fairgrounds. Those were allowed. They were not deemed to be problematic. The aisles, the space between booths, are the equivalent of fire lanes, and our agreements with all of the vendors, all of those that are there, nothing outside the booth space. They can't do the barking, the promoting, they can't do signage, because that area needs to be left as clear as possible for the movement of foot traffic. And the chalk drawing is something that has come up. The policy does not speak to every possible permutation of signage or activity that's in the right-of-way kind of fire egress spaces, but it is denied as a safety concern. And that's why the fair staff moved very quickly to say you cannot draw on the ground and create interesting things to say that stops traffic in areas where the traffic needs to keep moving. Likely there will be more of that, but I didn't know if there's any thoughts or questions or anything needed by the board, but we'll handle that when it's your time for announcements. I should have done this while Mike was here. Steve did want me to share. You probably saw the communication that we were number 8 in the nation for counties from 250,000 to 499,000. Please note that we're the only Oregon county in any of the categories that won any recognition for the Digital Counties Survey. So we are the only one of the 36 counties. We're actually, in our category, we're one of the only 3 counties on the West Coast, west of the Mississippi, that received this award. All the rest were East Coast urban dense areas. So this really is quite an achievement. It's the 3rd year in a row that we've been recognized, and we'd like to certainly move up from number 8, but the fact that we're getting national recognition is a pretty big deal. You probably noticed while we were here this afternoon that a red flag warning went out from now through midday on Thursday, and that is for lightning strikes, weather conditions in the Cascades. So we will be monitoring that. You probably saw that the Piper fire started yesterday evening. It would be wrong for me to say that the wind was blowing towards Klamath County, and it was virtually at our border already. We've not been asked for supporter activity for that fire, and we'll certainly keep you up to speed if there's anything that happens there. And then just finally, really quickly, I wanted to thank you all for supporting our visitors from Kazakhstan last week. I mean, this was an international group here to look at think tanks studying the collaboration between local governments and research universities, and they chose us. This was, our federal government and the research university organizations looking for places that were relevant to their needs, and they wanted them to come here to see what we're doing in terms of our partnership. And your participation was really valuable. Sorry we kept this up here, but we actually kind of like it in terms of just remembering the 4,700 square miles of remarkable diversity, just incredible, the challenges you are faced with in terms of the areas you cover. So we might get a fresh sign for your hallway and might keep this in here for a while. And I think that is all I have, Chair.
Great, wonderful. Thank you for all that information.
Thanks, Fred.
Any questions for Mr. Rickoff or any comments? If not, it's our turn for announcements. As he said, he was waited and bated breath for. Anybody got announcements from the board? Yes, Commissioner Trigger.
Oh, well, it's
No?
not an announcement. It's more comments and remonstrance than an announcement.
Well, we'll lump that A through C together.
A through
Commissioner
C.
Trigger,
Okay.
go ahead, please.
I appreciate the remarks about FAIR. I was going to bring that up personally as the liaison on the FAIR board and in my one-on-one with County Council. I want to have a little more conversation about that before I make any potential assignment I might make. But I will note, this is not the first time we've had an issue with objectionable and hurtful merchandise being sold or presented on offer and getting a lot of community feedback. And I do appreciate, as always, our PIO being responsive, particularly after hours and on weekends. And I understand that the letter of the law makes such things allowable, but that does not make them right. And because we've faced this before, we did start down a path with our Office of County Council and the Fair Board to create some parameters for vendors at our Lane Event Center, not exclusive to the fair, but to any renters there, about our expectations and how we ensure it aligns with this organization's values. And I think either a ball got dropped or some guidelines didn't get utilized. I'm not sure which. And that's why I don't have any particular assignment request today, but might after I have a little more conversation with our chief counsel at my next one-on-one and hear what the Fair Board has to say at our meeting next week. But I just want the community to know how much I appreciate folks having eyes out and letting us know how hurtful and harmful it was and how unsafe and unwelcome so many people felt at our event this year because of it.
Anyone else? If I could piggyback on top of that, just as an accolade, our director, Corey Buller, and his security team, EPD, led by Lieutenant Mike Ware and his team, was incredible. I was in contact with him most of the weekend via text and phone calls on site, and they were responsive, courteous, aware, sensitive to different folks' emotions without getting interfering. And I thought they just, I don't know how much better of a job they could have done. They did a superlative job. So I just want to make sure they are recognized by Lane County for stepping in and doing what they do best, and that's keep the peace. Thank you. All right, anything else? Future board assignments? Commissioner Trigger, you said you were going to wait for a little bit?
Yeah, I have to have some conversations
sounds
before I
good.
see whether there's an
Anybody else? Any other business for the board at this time? If not, I'd like to read us into exec session before we adjourn this regular session of the Board of County Commissioners. The Board of County Commissioners will now meet in one executive session. The session is to consider information or records that are exempt by law from public inspection and is held pursuant to ORS 192.6602F, which allows the Board of Commissioners to meet in executive session for the purpose listed. Representatives of the news media and designated staff shall be allowed to attend the executive session. All of the members of the audience are precluded from attending. Representatives of the news media are specifically directed not to report on any of the deliberations during the executive session except to state the general subject of the session as previously announced. Members of the news media are not allowed to videotape or video record or otherwise tape or record an executive session, and verbatim notes are prohibited. No decision may be made in executive session. We will return to a public session on Tuesday, August 12th at 9 a.m. in Harris Hall. This is a time certain item. We'll meet back here in this room at 3:50 sharp. We are adjourned.